The Pro Wrestling Push Me poll is an objective, data-based ranking of pro wrestlers by how heavily they were being pushed each month. Not match quality, not retrospective nostalgic name value, but a real-time spotlight of who promoters were putting in the biggest spots at the time. The only truly objective way to gauge success in the industry. Wrestlers earn push points for main events, titles held and wrestled for, and appearances on big shows, all weighted by how big their respective companies were at the time. With their big Survivor Series show airing in November, the WWF entirely dominates this month's top 10, just like they did in January, April, and August when they staged one of their other big quarterly pay-per-views. But unlike those other months, for the first time in 1990, the monthly top 10 is entirely WWF, primarily because for the first time at 1990's show, the survivors of the individual elimination matches qualified to a grand finale match of survival. So anyone who qualified for that got double the amount of those big supercard push points for wrestling twice. What that means in practice is that mid-card WWF wrestlers like Rick Martel, the Warlord in Power and Glory this month, squeeze out the other big companies' champions, Sting, Riki Choshu, and Stan Hansen, as the month's most pushed wrestlers. But we'll touch on what was happening in WCW, New Japan, and All Japan in November, as usual after we've analyzed the top 10 point scores. WWF World Champion, The Ultimate Warrior, takes the #1 spot in November as usual. At the Survivor Series, he teamed with Intercontinental Champion, the Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich, himself in at #7 this month, as well as the Legion of Doom, Hawk, and Animal as the Warriors team, an iconic lineup. And they took on and beat the Perfect Team, Mr. Perfect, and the three-man team of Demolition, in the first of 5 advertised team elimination matches, with Warrior as the sole survivor going on to qualify for the match of survival in the main event. Opposing team captain Mr. Perfect makes #5 in this month's top 10. Perfect had actually defeated the Texas Tornado at a Superstars TV taping to regain the Intercontinental title at this point. But that match wouldn't air on TV until the following month, so Tornado was still wearing the belt at the Survivor Series. This kind of confusion wasn't all that uncommon in the early 90s. If it hadn't happened on TV yet, it hadn't happened full stop. Hulk Hogan comes in at #2 for November, and he captained his team of Hulkamaniacs, the Big Boss Man, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and Tugboat, to defeat the Natural Disasters team of Earthquake, Dino Bravo, Haku, and the Barbarian, with Hogan as the sole survivor from that match. Million Dollar Man Ted DiBiase is in at #3 as he captained his $1 Million team of Rhythm and Blues and mystery partner The Undertaker, making his iconic WWF debut to victory over the Dream Team combination of Dusty Rhodes, tag team champions The Hart Foundation, and Coco Beware in what was probably the best match on the show, featuring a great little closing sprint between DiBiase and Bret Hart, which DiBiase won to become the first survivor to qualify on the heel side for the grand finale. DiBiase also challenged Warrior for the WWF title the following night on the televised main event TV special, but we'll get to that after Survivor Series. Macho King Randy Savage, the #1 contender to Warrior's title, comes in at #4 for November. Savage didn't wrestle at the Survivor Series. He just cut a promo about his plans to take the WWF title from the Warrior and then potentially retire with it. But he would make his presence felt against Warrior the following night on TV, again more of which shortly. Tito Santana, in at #6, became the unlikely sole survivor as the team of the Alliance, Captain Nikolai Volkov, Tito and the Bushwhackers, took on the Mercenaries, Sergeant Slaughter, Boris Zukov, and the Orient Express after Slaughter, having cut a pre-match anti-American promo pledging allegiance to the Iraqi flag, was disqualified for the outside interference of his manager General Adnan. And finally we had Werninin, for the first time in Survivor Series history, the entire team of the Visionaries, the model Rick Martel, the Warlord in Power and Glory surviving their match against the team of the Vipers, Jake the Snake Roberts, Superfly Jimmy Snuka and the Rockers, with all 4 of them qualifying for the match of survival. The Visionaries come in at numbers 8, 9, and 10 as a result of this. So for the main event, we had Warrior, Hogan, and Tito on one side, and DiBiase, Martel, Warlord, and Power and Glory on the other. Warrior and Hogan survived, the 2 biggest stars of the company. And the former adversaries put each other over to close the show in a feel-good moment. Warrior and Hogan are a comfortable 1 and 2 for November, and the 2 of them are so far ahead on push points for the year that they'll also finish numbers 1 and 2 for the whole of 1990, regardless of what happens in December. These two were just head and shoulders above everyone else in terms of industry success and push in 1990. And the Survivor Series was another good pay-per-view for the WWF in 1990, entertaining and packed with star power from top to bottom. Even the gobbledygooker is kind of charming in a kind of sports mascot intermission way. So on to the following night in the WWF and the main event 4 TV special. Warrior defended the WWF title against DiBiase in a surprisingly good match that ended in a DQ when Virgil interfered. But the real drama came after the bell in that match when Randy Savage ran in and put an absolute post-match beatdown on Warrior, choking him out with the King's scepter and holding up the title belt. Officials swarmed the ring to stop Savage's rampage, and this was really great stuff, building anticipation for a huge Warrior-Savage title match that sadly never came. Savage put a beating on Warrior at the main event 4, like we'd never seen anyone put a beating on Warrior before. And Warrior versus Savage finally felt like a top-line feud worthy of the WWF World title, in a way that Warrior versus Rick Rude earlier in the year really hadn't. Ironically, just as Warrior's title run was finally picking up some steam and emotional investment alongside Savage after a relatively underwhelming opening salvo that had seen the company's popularity slump from previous years, we were just a couple of months away from seeing the Warrior experiment brought to a premature end, and the company pivot back to reliable old Hulk Hogan once again. More on those maneuvers next month. Elsewhere at the main event show, Mr. Perfect beat the Big Boss Man by countout, and Tito Santana and the model Rick Martel finally had a high-profile one-on-one TV match, just a year and a half after Strikeforce split up. So that was all the major goings-on in the WWF in a very busy month for them. But there were other wrestling companies all still continuing to exist outside of this month's top 10, so let's run through the major happenings in those. In the NWA/WCW, World Champion Sting put the debacle of last month's Halloween Havoc defense behind him, but still had the ridiculous Black Scorpion angle hanging over him. Black Scorpion demonstrated more black magic to freak out Sting at Clash of the Champions 13, while Ric Flair beat Butch Reed in the main event of that show to earn the Horsemen, Flair and Arn Anderson, another shot against World Tag Team Champions Doom, Reed and Ron Simmons, next month at Starrcade. The Steiner brothers remained the secondary U.S. Tag Team Champions, feuding with the Nasty Boys. There were some pretty weird parallels going on between the WWF and the NWA/WCW in the second half of 1990. Both companies had put their eggs in the basket of young, face-painted muscleheads in the forms of Ultimate Warrior and Sting that were over with the fans to move into the new decade with someone new other than the established star that had carried their respective companies through the 80s, Hogan for the WWF and Flair for the NWA, both of whom were seen to be losing their luster somewhat as the last decade came to a close. But both companies had seen business get even worse under these hot new stars in 1990, and with both companies, those experiments were largely perceived to be failing as 1990 started winding down. So it's interesting that while Warrior and Sting remained the champions of their respective companies as the year came to a close, both Hogan and Flair were being positioned back into the main event scene of each company, and plans were being made to reset, bail on the hot new young guys, and default back to the established main eventers of Hogan and Flair for 1991. Just an interesting parallel that two almost identical experiments had taken place, and both largely failed over the same time period. Warrior's and Sting's careers took wildly different paths after their first runs on top were largely seen to be failures, but we'll get to all that in due course as we keep going through pushes, titles held, and runs on top month by month. In New Japan, Riki Choshu remained IWGP champion, beating Shinya Hashimoto in a defense. Hiroshi Hase and Kensuke Sasaki won the IWGP tag team titles from Keiji Muto and Masahiro Chono in a really good match that would probably be my match of the month for November. And Jushin Liger regained the junior heavyweight title from Pegasus Kid Chris Benoit. All Japan, the Real World Tag League got underway, with Triple Crown champion Stan Hansen teaming with Danny Spivey and Jumbo Tsuruta teaming with Akira Taue. In EMLL in Mexico, the most featured Technicos were El Faraón, Ringo Mendoza, Pero Aguayo, Atlantis, Lizmark and Sangre Chicana. The most featured Rudos, Fabuloso Blondie, Pirata Morgan, Fuerza Guerrera, and Satanico. Arena Mexico featured two big luchas de apuestas, bet matches. El Faraón beat Pirata Morgan in a hair match on November 16th, And Ringo Mendoza beat Fabuloso Blondie in a hair match on the November 30th Friday show. In Memphis, Jerry Lawler dropped the USWA title to veteran Terry Funk, back out of retirement again, and continued to feud with Eddie Gilbert as well. And in Portland, Steve Dahl beat the Grappler to win the Pacific Northwest title. That's your lot for November 1990. Please like, share, subscribe, check out the video links in the description, leave any comments below, and join me next time for December 1990. WCW Starrcade. In closing out the year, thanks for watching, and see you next time. Cheers.